Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we have another Atari prototype for you, and that is Primal Rage 2, because this obviously never actually released to arcades. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But obviously, Primal Rage 2 never released, and right off the top you're going to see some differences. You are playing as quote-unquote human characters versus the animals in the original game, and it's a very interesting design decision. My guess would be that it's easier to relate to human characters and maybe make them things kind of like the characters from Mortal Kombat versus trying to get people associated with animals and liking them. That's just a thought. But of course, this never released. It was cancelled, and it's another fighting game in Atari's roster of arcade games that never actually came out. And interestingly enough, this is a really fun game. There's nothing here that says it's so bad they just gave up on it. What it's probably more likely is that in 96, 97, when this game was slated to release and in development, arcades in North America were having a bad time financially, and Atari may have felt that they might not recoup their investment on sales because every arcade developer and their uncle had a fighting game on the market trying to replicate the success of something like Mortal Kombat. And so many of those games failed, so it's possible Atari thought the resources could better be devoted to a different genre. Think something like San Francisco Rush. All the sequels for that game released and they all did incredibly well. So it's unfortunate that we never got Primal Rage 2, but thanks to preservationists and some intrepid modders, there is MAME for Rage. It is a custom version of MAME that is designed to run one game and one game only, obviously that being Primal Rage 2. And don't worry, it does have fatalities. If you want to jump rope with some intestines, you can 100% do that in the game. I have some trouble pulling them off even though I have a command list, but I think that's just down to me. The game is very responsive and plays probably like it's 75 to 80% done. This does not seem like a tech demo or a 25% build. This feels like it's at the stage where it just needs some polish and balance, because I will say both on the CPU side and the player character side, you can get your enemies into almost stagger states where you cannot do anything but damage them. They can't get out of it. So it seems like maybe 70% on this build, but I just love what it does. I've always loved this pre-rendered look, and it does an incredible job, and all of the Primal Rage mechanics are here. Now, I come from an SNK background. I've been playing Neo Geo since it was out in arcades as a kid, so nothing ever feels quite as good as an SNK fighting game to me, but I give Primal Rage 2 a lot of credit. What's here is really good, and I love all the backgrounds and art style as well, even those animal transformations. And I do think from a design standpoint, while it is an odd choice to go to these human characters, it does make more sense that it is fun to be playing as something you recognize versus just playing as something like a dinosaur or otherwise. I always enjoyed the original Primal Rage, but I never felt it was as good as other games, and it may be down to that character selection, which I think they've done a great job of sort of rectifying here. And I am disappointed that this didn't release, because I'm sure back in the day, this is the type of thing that I really would have gravitated towards as a kid. And I'm always disappointed when any arcade game or console game does get cancelled, because what I love so much is preserving and playing prototypes and releasing them when I can. And the fact that this is even available to play in and of itself is spectacular. And that's something that I always want to celebrate on the channel. How much work goes into doing something like this? You need to find a prototype, you need to acquire the prototype, you need to dump the ROMs and the hard drive in this instance. Even though it is based on the PlayStation 1 hardware in arcades, it does use a hard drive, and then you gotta get code set up to emulate it. And the emulation is great, including the soundtrack, which is awesome. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, and I'll come back and talk more about the story of Primal Rage 2. Hey, the soundtrack sounds like Primal Rage to me, kind of that rock with those sort of jungle sound effects in it. What I'm really interested with in Primal Rage 2 is why Atari just didn't pivot to making this a console-only release where you would have had a much larger audience for the game and you wouldn't have to invest in all that expensive hardware and cabinet circuitry and monitors just to get this thing in arcades, because each arcade cabinet costs a lot to make and it costs a lot to ship. Where if you just put this on a disc, a PlayStation 1 owner already has the hardware at home. All you need to do is finish the game, press a disc, and ship it. And this doesn't seem like anything that the PlayStation 1 wouldn't be capable of, but there aren't really great specs on what sort of variations this hardware used compared to something like a stock PlayStation 1. I've got a few PlayStation 1 arcade boards in my closet. Crypt Killer just has 2 megabytes extra of sound RAM. Sometimes they're basically completely stock, sometimes the CPU is clocked higher. But without the specs here, we're not quite sure, but I'm sure this could have been made to run on a PlayStation 1, and maybe that would have been a more sound decision business-wise for Atari to actually utilize the work they had done and release it on the home console only, bypassing that big expense of trying to get operators to buy these cabinets. Because that is always the math with these sort of things. Every cabinet's expensive, there's an investment made in the boards and the cabinet itself and the development, and you need to sell so many cabinets to recoup your investment. And if the bean counters at Atari didn't think that Primal Rage 2 was going to do it, you know full well they were going to cancel the game, and that's the biggest bummer, because all of the gameplay here is so much fun. The controls are responsive, the moves are great, and if I remember, I'll leave a link down below to the move list because there is one. It's a really competent fighting game, and I love the style of it. All of those pre-rendered backgrounds with the buildings and that rubble and that bridge broken, and how they kind of have a pseudo-parallax effect where the perspective sort of shifts depending where you are on the stage. It has everything that the 90s would have loved, and this definitely is a game of its time and place, and feels like it is ripped straight from the 90s because, well, it in fact is. All of the colors, the fatalities, the animals, the pre-rendered backgrounds, this is what games looked like back then, and if you didn't grow up in arcades in the 90s, this may look a little janky to you, but if you were back then playing this game, you would have thought these graphics looked absolutely spectacular, even these waterfalls in the background. And that little bit of shimmer on the water doesn't do much, but it's fun. And of course, I always love the villagers down below that are basically worshipping these massive human beings that turn into animals. But that still is an interesting design decision to go away from the animal combatants and to go over to humans. And my guess would be maybe they were trying to sell action figures or make a cartoon or something, because these characters have quote-unquote personalities that the player could more associate with. I mean, how are you really going to associate with a T-Rex versus something like Kina here? It at least looks like a person. And the pre-rendered visuals are quite good. They've got that sort of rare Donkey Kong Country vibe to them with their own particular personality. So I would say that this game is just a ton of fun. It controls well, it looks good. It's just such a bummer that it didn't get released. And there's so many different characters, some that you're going to instantaneously click with, some that you're going to hate completely. Kina is my main when I play the game, and somebody like Yao Ming here, I think that's how it's pronounced, just never really feels right to me, but I do love that little rope behind him, that little ribbon that kind of undulates as you move back and forth, and his transformation character, that saber-toothed looking tiger, is always a good time. But one of the primary reasons I'm talking about Primal Rage 2 is I am always advocating for the preservation of rare games on my channel, and I do on occasion buy them with my own money and dump them for free for everybody to enjoy. Because this game could easily either be A, lost if it was not backed up and preserved, or B, sitting in a private collector's hands and only able to be enjoyed by that one individual person, and that is something that I can never advocate for. The fact that so many people were involved in getting this running so you could play it is nothing short of spectacular, and that's always something that I'm going to give 10 thumbs up to, because I love that sort of thing. Because this is a really good game, and fans of the original Primal Rage are going to be really happy playing it, even if it isn't finished. But it is totally finished enough for you to enjoy it, for you to play with friends, for you to have a really good time. And most of the moves, if not all of them at this point in time, have been figured out. So you can take a look at that move sheet and really get good at the game. But leave me a comment down below. Were you a fan of the original Primal Rage, and have you checked out Primal Rage 2? Sure to that I will be back next week with another episode of Unported Playlists, and I'll put up a long play as well for you to see some more footage. But yeah, Primal Rage 2, it exists. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.